In his writing, The Republic, the Greek philosopher Plato acknowledged that opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. And in fact, the same idea has rung true today in today's society with numerous topics in which individuals aren't too informed about, however, they still form their own ideas and opinions, almost like a child without too much information. We can look at the Washington Redskins name and how the different arguments have come into play with that, how it's continued to allow an idea of marginalization, an idea of inequality. And in fact, I want to ask many of you today, have you formed your thoughts? Have you voiced your frustrations on either side of the issue? Being well-versed in the sports industry myself, I of course already knew about the Washington Redskins name. Further, however, recently I've come more familiar with the ins and outs of the Redskins ideal, the Redskins, how it came to be, why it came to be, and why some are too stagnant to change it. And I've noticed that if there's no U.S. government policy changes, if there are no impacts on the federal level, nothing will change and we'll continue to allow inequality within the various demographics in America. So why does Redskin matter? What does it mean? It first came about in 1932 when George Preston Marshall bought the Washington Redskins. At the time they were called the Braves, and then he changed their name fairly quickly. Funny thing about Marshall, he was a known segregationist according to Rasul in 2014. And when he changed it to Redskin, they had a lot of back and forth when it came to the trademark protections, and this eventually culminated in 2014 when, going basically the whole 9 yards, the United States Trademark and Patent Office chose to eliminate the Washington Redskins trademark protections, basically saying that they could not use that and they could not have any protections for their term. However, they've continued to use it, and continually using the term Redskin has enabled continuous marginalization and inequality throughout the nation. Have you, or anyone you've ever known, been separated or faced an inequality based on their race, economic status, or any other factor? Well, that's exactly what Redskin creates. It creates an ideal where individuals are constantly in a battle for equality. We can look at a 2014 ESPN poll that acknowledged that 25% of Native Americans are offended by the term Redskin. Now that may seem like a small number. Sure, it may seem like a small number, but if we don't do anything about that number, then it very well may get out of hand. Because let's just expound that one out. If 25% of the entire American population is offended by something like that, then we might acknowledge that to be a big deal. But if we dismiss 25% of a smaller demographic, then we're just dismissing the group entirely. We're acknowledging their inequalities to be useless, to be pointless. And this continued lack of knowledge and this continued lack of empathy for the Native Americans has furthered the divide throughout America. And this is what the Washington Redskins promote when they continue to use their team name. It was interesting to note that also over half of the people studied by ESPN didn't even have an opinion because they don't have the knowledge regarding Redskins. They don't know what George Preston Marshall did to bring that into place. But we can overcome this continued divide. We can overcome these continued derogatory narratives. We can hear the stories from professional organizations to the players themselves and see how they have overcome these divides and how they have continued to voice their frustrations. Look at the Cleveland Indians, for example. They had Chief Wahoo. That's Chief Wahoo right there. He's a caricature of a Native American, a Redskin, fun fact. He was rather offensive to the Native American population, and very quickly and very swiftly, then the Cleveland Indians chose to phase out Chief Wahoo respectfully and quickly, doing so acknowledging the public outcry and doing their best to act proactively. Meanwhile, we can see how an individual like Champ Bailey, he was a former cornerback for the Washington Redskins. He's not Native American. He's an African American man. But he compared the term Redskin to other racial terms. Specifically for Bailey, he compared it to the N-word, saying that in an interview with the USA Today, he acknowledged that Redskin is just like any other racial term. It's derogatory, it's demeaning, and he said if he was walking down the street and he hears the N-word, he's just as offended as anyone, any Native American would be when they hear the term Redskin. Now you see how organizations have dealt with the term Redskin and how players have dealt with the term Redskin. But let's just imagine a situation where Dan Snyder and his associates flourish off the Washington Redskin name, and the title, the logo, the demeaning nature of it. Or we can imagine a situation where Native Americans are continually marginalized. We can even look back at maybe something like the Civil War. Or let's go as far to say maybe Hitler's reign. We could go as far to say that. Ultimately though, if we look through both recent and distant history, we see how various individuals have pointed to a need for change when it comes to these demeaning terms. And for the term Redskin, it's an issue that needs to go to the federal level. If we voice our opinions, we can make a difference at the federal level. So I encourage you all to go home, reflect on the term Redskin, reflect on what it means to Native Americans, and then apply it to your own life. If you were a Native American, how would that make you feel? Try to put yourself in their shoes. Together, we can set our standards high for Native American sports teams.